Hello everyone and welcome to our Great Garment Graphics webinar today. I'm Josh Ellsworth with Stahl's CAD Cut Direct, and I'll be your presenter today, and we're talking all about saving time and money really by utilizing CADWorksLive.com, a free online designer. We have a good amount of attendees today, so we appreciate everybody taking the time to come on. For those of you that haven't been on before to one of our webinars, you can type questions into your right-hand panel that will come directly to me as I'm presenting. I will try to pause throughout the webinar today to read the questions and respond to all of the questions that come in as long as they apply within the flow of the webinar. So we'll try to answer all the questions by the time we're done today. First, I have some questions for you, and I want to start by launching a poll to those that have logged in so far. And the first question I'll ask is, do you own a vinyl cutter? So if you can simply click yes or no. I imagine the majority of our audience today does own a vinyl cutter. If you're interested in learning about CAD Works Live, you probably own one, or interested in creating art for another process, maybe. All right, 78% of our audience has voted. Give a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. Let's share those results. So 89% of the attendees today do own a vinyl cutter, and we have 11% that do not out of the 82% that voted. And let's launch another question here. I want to figure out what design software you currently use. Now, I didn't include CAD Works Live in this question. I'm going to launch another poll momentarily that asks if you've ever used CAD Works Live, but just mark the design software you use, Illustrator, Corel, both, or none. A couple more seconds. Okay, I'll share those results. So 69% Corel, 14% Illustrator, 10% use both, and 7% none. Now, I'm sure within these responses there's a variety of expertise levels with each software. We probably have some expert artists and some that are just beginning. And then the last question I'm going to ask before we get into the presentation is, have you ever used CAD Works Live? Well, it's running pretty close here. 76% have voted. And we'll go ahead and close out the results here and share them with you. So 68% attending today have never used CAD Works Live, and 32% have used it. So good. These are it's great information as I dive in today and try to explain the value of CAD Works Live for those that have never used it before, and also try to explain to those that are actively using it maybe some things you didn't know about the program, so you can pick up some tips and tricks throughout the presentation today. We'll kind of start at the beginning. CADWorksLive.com is an online design software. So to get to it, you need to type in CADWorksLive.com into the web browser of your choice. In this case, I'm utilizing Google Chrome for the presentation today. But once you log in, once you type in CADWorksLive.com, you can register for a free trial. CAD Works Live is available ongoing for free to any group Stahl customer. So if you're a customer of Stahl's ID Direct, Stahl's CAD Cut Direct, Imprintables Warehouse, Transfer Express, you have free access to a very powerful designer that you'll learn a lot about today. When you log into the site, this CAD Works Live was launched quite a few years ago, so there's a couple different versions of designers that have been released over the past 5+ years. Everybody kind of picks which one they like to use. For today's presentation, we're going to use the CAD Print Designer, which is my favorite, as well as the CAD Cut Easy Teams. So you'll see a lot of functionality of these two programs. So when you sign up for your trial, you just launch the designer from this link, and you go onto a blank design screen like this, and this is where you can start. CAD Works Live is all about creating cuttable vector art. So the goal of this program is to create artwork that we can send to our vinyl cutters. You can create artwork that you can export vector files to send to other print processes, or even to upload to stalls for us to produce your graphic if you don't own a vinyl cutter already. One of the most simplistic things about the program is the templating feature. It's very powerful, but it's really simple to use, so I'm just going to click and launch the templates. And you can see, for those of you that are Transfer Express customers, you're familiar with their idea book and how they categorize a bunch of different topics for different layouts or templates. CAD Works Live is much of the same. You have a bunch of different topics. Let's click on sports. If I double-click on sports, it flies out the menu where I can go sports-specific. So let's say I want to create a design for basketball season coming up. Down at the bottom of the page, you can click on Next and kind of go through all the layouts and templates that are already in here. So this artwork is all included for free to you. So let's just pick a simple layout that I want to work with. So I'm going to just pick something basic here, like this Tigers basketball, and click the Open button. Once you get the particular layout you want, it's going to open on the screen, and then I can begin to edit this layout from here. So you can see the layout contains a lot of different elements. There's some clip art elements that you see in the center here. There's a text element, a couple different areas of text and different objects. CAD Works Live is pretty powerful in that you can double-click on any text element and immediately edit it. So I'm just going to double-click on the word Tigers here, and it is going to take it into my editing screen. One of the unique features of CAD Works is the effects stack that you're able to see here across the bottom of the screen. You'll see this effects stack throughout the presentation today, so it's important to understand how it works. You can see I have the text element highlighted, and so all of the options, the edit options for the text portion of the design, are available to be changed here. Likewise, I can click on the different effects that have been added to it, so the envelope, and change the properties of the particular envelope. Click on the drop shadow, and I can change the properties of the drop shadows specifically. But let's just get down to basics, and let me remove all these effects just by selecting them and clicking Remove Effects. And let's start with some basic text. I'll change the fill color first so we can see it a little better. I'm just going to change it to black. So you can see the first and most basic thing is we can change the name. So if we wanted to change it from Tigers and say this is for the Clippers, we can just type in the text that we want. It will automatically render on the screen. Likewise, there's a font option, and I can just click inside of the font box, and CAD Works comes preloaded with a variety of fonts that you can use. They're all categorized here. You can get some of the most popular Stalls fonts, including fonts like Team US, Stalls Varsity. You can also upload your own fonts from your computer. If it's a true type font, you can click this button to upload the font, and it will be added to your library under the My Fonts folder. So you can store any fonts that you have on your computer that are true type fonts onto here. So in this case, I'm just going to select a font that's already included. There's hundreds of fonts in here that are included, and I'll select Varsity. When I click Open, it automatically changes the text to render in the font of my selection. I can also change the size of the text. So if I want it to be 1.5 inches tall, I can just type that in. It'll size it. If I don't, this spacing's pretty good, but let's say there were some characters with the font I selected that were too close together. I can edit the character spacing right here just by typing it in, and it will space out the characters a little further for me. So once I have the font I like, the size, the spacing, then you can begin to customize this particular piece of text through the effect stack. I'm going to click Add Effect. And CAD Works has a variety of effects already set up for you that you can just add. So it's one of the simplest ways to do things like add an outline with the contour feature, or add a drop shadow, or an arc, or any variety of effects. You can see they're all categorized in here. But you know, I can click on contour and I can see there's multiple styles of contours that I can apply, whether it's just a basic outline or it could be a gap outline. So I'll select the gap outline to show you how that works. Just click the open button and it adds the gap outline to my text. Now when I'm dealing with the particular contour effect, I can change the offset on that. So if I wanted it to be, you know, let's just say 0.05, so it's a little bit, you know, more proportionate to the text, I can type all that in. I can change the fill color of the contour if I want it to be orange. And it'll automatically change it. It's tough to see the difference between orange and red, I guess. If I didn't want holes, I can click on no holes, and you can see how it kind of fills in these spaces, so these aren't areas that I'll have to weed after it's been cut. Visually, this isn't too appealing, but for a basic contour effect, sometimes the no holes button saves you some step in the labor process. But you can add as many effects as you want. If I like, you know, if I wanted to add an arch to this, I can just open it, you know, and add multiple effects, and then I can change the property of the arch. But once I create exactly what I want for that text element, I click OK, and you can see it drops it within my design. I'm going to delete this maroon colored box out of the background so we can see it a little better. There is an undo key, so you can see there's some, I want to change this white text over to something I can visually see before I get rid of my maroon color here. So I'm just selecting the text elements and changing the color up in my swatch list in the top right. But now I'll delete the maroon, and we can get a good visual. Let me zoom it to fit. So you can see I'm starting to create a design. Now if I didn't want this whole element in the center here, I can delete that and drop in my own piece of clip art. You just kind of start building from a template and customize it how you want. So I can go to the clip art button on the left side. In case you didn't see that, I just went to the left here and clicked on clip art, which allows you to add clip art. And just like you saw before, there's a hierarchy of different folders by different categories. So let's go back to the sports. And we can see all of these different options. You know, there's a search key as well. So if you're looking for something specific, like in this case, I'm looking for basketball, stuff that's tagged with a basketball as a keyword, I can scroll through the different options there. You can also bring in your own clip art. If you have a clip art package such as Stahl's Cut-Ups and you want to use art from that, you can do that as well. In this case, let me just pick something simple here. Open it, and it's dropped right onto the screen. I'm going to delete some of these elements here to get it down to a simple design. You can see how I'm kind of dragging stuff here, and I'm just creating this. I didn't pre-plan this design. We're just creating this on the fly. So if I wanted to change it to be relevant to this year, I can make it 2012. I'm just going to change that number 8 to 2012 and click OK. It's really tough to line things up here. If I want the 20 and the 12 to be lined up, what I can do is I can draw a box around them just like you would in Corel to select multiple items. And you can actually go up to the Align tool, and you can align them by the middle, horizontally by the middle, and you can see they'll adjust them to make sure they're in good proportion to one another. So it's really simple to edit stuff, to align stuff. If I want to make sure that this basketball text with the clip art and my top name are all aligned as well, I can go up to the Align button and make sure they're centered. And you can see it tweaked it a little bit, and it gave a little bit of overlap at the bottom. So I'd have the choice to move this or to weld it together. When you're cutting, you want to keep things welded together, and what that means is you don't want overlapping cut lines. So if you imagine cutting this out of CAD Cut heat transfer film, there's going to be some overlapping lines here. I'm not seeing them because I'm not looking at the wireframe view. If you do want to look at the wireframe view in CAD Works, you won't see the colors, but you can click on the wireframe button down in the bottom right of the designer, And now when I look at this, you can see how these lines are overlapping. And so it's going to create really a messy or ugly looking cut that may translate over to the finished garment that my customer may see. So in this case, I'm going to select the basketball text. I'm going to hold the Shift key on my keyboard, which you cannot see, and select that basketball clip art that it's connected to. And then I'm going to complete the weld function. Just go up to shaping, click on weld, and you can see, if you're watching this part of design, you can see how there's no overlapping cut lines any longer, which makes it very easy to work with. I will have to make sure I go in and weed the center here of what I've created in this L, but it's very easy to work with that way. So I'm going to switch it back off of Wireframe View so I can talk a little more. This is the basics of creating a template. So you can manipulate, delete clip art, add clip art, align text, weld things, manipulate text by adding effects. But at the end of the day, if this is the design I want for the Clippers basketball team, my next step after I create the layout can be a couple things. One is maybe I want to define a size here. So if you saw, I just drug a box from bottom left all the way up to top right, and I can actually type in the dimensions that I want. If I have specific dimensions that I know that I need for this team, I can just type those in. You can lock the aspect ratio, which basically means if I lock it and type in a certain width, it's going to size the height proportionally based on the dimension of the design right now. If you have no idea what size you want that design, but you know it's going on a, let's say, an adult t-shirt, you can click on the size to fit button. And if I click on the size to fit button, we've preset up some different sizes for you. So I can size it to fit an adult t-shirt, a medium t-shirt, whatever. If these sizes aren't what you want, you can set up your own custom sizes. So I could say, you know, if there's a specific size, let's say this is for a shooting shirt for warm-ups. You know, I can type in, you know, I want to define a shooting shirt size. It's going to be 15 by 12, and I can add that shooting shirt size to my library. And so moving forward, anytime I do a shooting shirt, I can have my pre-populated quick sizing, select it, and it's automatically going to size it. Let me zoom it to fit again so you can see. You can see it sized the whole design proportionally to them to those dimensions. So when I select it, you can see it's 13.9 by 12 now. So that's just one quick way. Let's get the design to the size that we want. At this point, if I'm happy with the sizing, I'm happy with the layout, I'm ready to send it over to my cutter. Something I want you to step back and understand is CADWorksLive.com is an online designer. However, it doesn't send from the internet to your cutter. It creates a file that can be downloaded onto your local computer from the internet, and it can be automatically downloaded into the CAD Works cut driver, which is called Vector Cut. So to make sense of that, basically when you log into CAD Works, and if you go to the download screen, you can see that there's a free CAD Works Live Vector Cut driver. This is something you need to have downloaded onto the PC computer that you're going to use to send to your cutter. Currently, it only works with PC computers to drive your cutter. Let's say you have your own cut driver already. For those of you that own cutters, it could be the Roll and Cut Studio cut driver. It could be some sort of sign program. I don't know. You can actually, you know, instead of downloading it straight to Vector Cut, you can just download an EPS file from CAD Works and import it over into your cut driver. But CAD Works was designed specifically to have a perfect marriage with Vector Cut to make it really efficient in your shop. So what I mean is this design's created, I can go to File, and you can see there's a button here that says Send to Vector Cut. There's also a button that says Export, where you can export it as an EPS, PLT, a variety of file formats, where you can bring it over into whatever cut driver you're comfortable with. But in this case, I'm going to click the Send to Vector Cut button so I can explain a little bit about Vector Cut. Just click the OK button. With the way Google Chrome works, you can see it downloads it right to the bottom toolbar here, and all I have to do is click on it to fly it open. and it brings it open straight in Vector Cut. Now before I get into details about Vector Cut, I'm going to look over at the questions and just see if there's anything that I can address. Will this be recorded for later viewing? Yes. And for those that don't have a cutter, can you show what happens? Yes. And somebody has a GCC, so no problem on the GCC. I'm going to explain that here momentarily. So for those of you that don't have a cutter, you wouldn't need to take it to a cut driver. What you would do in CAD Works is you would basically go to File and Export, and then you would export as whatever file format your supplier of transfers would want. I can speak for Stalls and say that we would want like an EPS file, anything that falls under the vector format. You're creating vector art, and there's a lot of value in using vector art as opposed to raster files that are going to need to be vectorized by your supplier that's cutting the designs, screen printing them, whatever. So if you want to send it to Stalls at this point, you would just export it as EPS, and you could upload it to our website for us to produce. You can see there's a variety of formats that you can export as. One thing I should mention, let's say you want to send it as a proof to Clippers basketball. You can actually export it as a JPEG, and you can add a watermark. So if your business name is, let's just say Josh's Teeth, you can add your own watermark, click OK, and it'll actually create a JPEG proof with the watermark that you can attach this to an email and maybe send a couple design styles over to your customer and see which one they like. Okay. But to go back to Vector Cut, appreciate the questions, keep them coming. When I take it to Vector Cut, it launches that local cut driver that I've downloaded, and then it shows on my screen here. Now Vector Cut has its own set of features. You can type in the material size. So let's say I have a 20-inch wide material loaded in the cutter. I'm going to type in about 18.5 inches wide to accommodate for the pinch rollers. And you can see how it sizes the sheet. Right now I have it at 36 inches in length, which is 1 yard, but let's say I want to cut a couple yards worth. I can size it to 72 inches. Zoom out so you can see it here. At this point, some of the key things, you can drive the Roland GX24 cutter. You can drive a variety of cutters, eyeline, Mamaki cutters here. If you have like a GCC cutter or another brand cutter, you can select the generic HPGL driver, which what that means is if you select the generic HPGL driver, you can go into the properties and specify what particular port you have it loaded into. So if it's a USB port, you'll do the printer port and just select whatever printer. In this case, your cutter would be set up as a printer, so you would select, GCC or whatever the name is. But in my case, I usually use the Roland GX24. So you just need to set up to output to your particular cutter. One of the cool thing is and you Illustrator users already have this functionality, but Corel users don't. The ability to cut by color. A lot of cut drivers don't have this. Vector Cut identifies when there's different colors coming across in the file, and instead of having to break apart layers and make separate pages and things in Corel, you can just bring it all over together, and when you select the black layer, it's going to separate all the different layers and colors in your design out. Now, of course, if I wanted to cut the black layer first, it's already justified down to the bottom left. I can just click the mirror button. I want to make sure it's mirrored in order to cut it out of heat transfer film, and I can send it over to the cutter. If I had 10 people on the team, I can type in 10 copies, click the copy button, and it'll drop 10 copies onto the page. As you can see, I'm going to exceed my 2 yards of material here, so I want to back that off or load more material. But then, after you set that up, you can send it to your cutter. This design's pretty large for the black layer, so I don't know that I can save any material by nesting anything up here. But when I select the red layer, I'll show you how that works. You can see it's already mirrored from me clicking the mirror button. I'm going to click on the Auto Origin button to take it down to the bottom left of the screen. And now let's say I want the same 10 copies. Click the Copy button. I may be able to select this and I double-clicked on it there so I can rotate it. You know, every square inch of heat transfer material you use is there's a cost to it. So if I want to really make the most of my material, I can rotate a couple here. It'll nest the best way it knows how, but it's not going to rotate stuff and do like complete auto nesting. It'll just stack them, but then you can drag them and drop them, and you can see I saved, you know, maybe 8 inches of material or something, and I can send the red layer over to the cutter. There's some other functionality of Vector Cut. However, I like to use it as a kind of like the job management tool. I do all my design, welding, everything in CAD Works, and I use Vector Cut specifically for making sure I'm making the best use of my material, cutting by color, and mirroring stuff and getting it over to the cutter to cut. That is Vector Cut in a nutshell. Mary asks, when you drop several copies, is there a way to get the cutter to cut that square around each separate file to make weeding easier? That's a good question. The auto weed border just places it around the whole design. I don't think there is a way to get it around each individual file. I typically don't like to. I like to do one weed border around everything. If I'm cutting a single design, obviously I want it around one. There is this weed line feature where you can actually drop in weed lines where it's going to make extra cuts, and it won't cut over top of the design. It'll just cut the areas where a design is not present, like for breaking up the sections of weeding, which may be what you're trying to accomplish anyways. I don't use that very often, but it's there, and I know a lot of people in sign vinyl use it, specifically since you're dealing with a sticky back material that when you start to get into too big of pieces, it makes it a mess if it touches down on a different area. But that's Vector Cut in a nutshell. It's really simple to use. So I'm going to jump back to CAD Works here. So we talked about the designer in working with templates. There's a lot of other functionality here, so I'm just going to delete this off of the screen. Actually, let me undo that for a second. Let's say you were exporting these as JPEGs, or you created this beautiful, stunning layout that you liked and wanted to be able to use for other teams. Maybe this Clippers basketball design is just a sample or a layout style that you want to display in your store or in your sales kit. You can actually save, go to File and click on Save As. And you can save the file itself, or you can save it as a template style. So let's just say this is, if I want to call this layout ABC 1, 2, 3, you can code it however you want. I can put some keywords, you know, this is for basketball, this is for shooting shirts, whatever keywords, you can tag your own keywords, and then you can save that. So the next time you log into CAD Works, and let's say you're not working on this design, you walk into a blank screen, you can just go to File, and you can go to Open, and it will have your ABC 1, 2, 3 layout that you can work from. So you can see, you know, these are just some different layouts that I've created in CAD Works. If you keep up with our Facebook page, you'll notice that some of this artwork has been used in photos we've displayed on there. But it's really, it's really simple to grab stuff from even a couple years ago and just change different elements about it. It's all saved. You can save your own clip art. You can create your own folders. In this case, I created like a Spiritware layout folder. Or your own templates to launch from. So this is all stored under your username when you log in. Okay, so that's a quick way to save some time with just general layout and be able to create. Another big thing that people struggle with is doing is taking artwork off of, say, like a business card, or if somebody brings in something from the internet and they bring it to you and they want you to produce it. That's usually a JPEG or PNG or a TIFF file, and it's something that's tough to work with. You can't just load it in your computer and cut it because there's no vector cut lines for the cutter to recognize. So this particular version of CAD Works, the CAD Print Designer, has a pretty cool feature. It's called Import and Vectorize. So if I go to File and click on Import and Vectorize, I can browse on my computer and bring in any JPEG file, a variety of other raster formats. In this case, I'll bring in something that I already have brought in before, which is a JPEG. Click on Next, and it's going to walk you through the steps to vectorize this. So the first thing it's going to say is click on the background color of your image. Typically it's white, but in this case it's black. I don't want that black area. Then I'm going to click Next. Now it says pick up the 9 foreground colors because it wants to know what colors it needs to vectorize around. Where's the image at? So in this case you can see there's 2 primary colors, pink and green, and it represents those here. I just click on Next. Now this part takes a few minutes, but anybody that's vectorized stuff on their own know it takes sometimes hours or half hours to do what this just completed in about a minute and a half. So it does its best representation of your design, and not only does it vectorize it and assigns the colors just like you selected. So if I like the visual of what it's created here, I click OK. If I want to tweak it, I can change the region resolution, this slider bar, and reapply to see what the result is. The better quality the raster file coming in, the better quality the vectorization coming out. Click OK. Then I'm happy with it, and it's going to drop it on my screen. As you can see, it's really huge because it was a high-res file. So I'm going to size it. Let's size it back down to something more reasonable that we can see here. So you can see it did a pretty good job of vectorizing this. I'll go to the Wireframe View to show you what it accomplished, and I'll zoom it to fit. So you can see, these are the cut lines that it's created, and it's identified the individual colors. Now maybe there's a couple floating pieces out here that I don't really want. So if I select it, this does have a break apart functionality where I can break it by colors, by regions, or by curves. In this case, curves is about as far down as you can go, so I'll break it by curves. And that's going to allow me to come in here and delete, just highlight and delete any little pieces that I may not want in my design. So if I don't want to weed out these little dots, I can just select them and draw boxes around different things and delete to kind of clean this up. Once I have it to a point where I want it, let me go back into the normal view. It's lagging a bit. Let me close down a couple things. It's having a hard time switching over. I got a lot of stuff running. I'm just going to take it straight over to Vector Cut, and then you'll see what I want to show you anyways. So you can see it's vector file, ready to go. All I need to do is mirror it and send it over to my cutter. So it doesn't get much simpler than that for vectorizing. Let me see if there's any questions here while I'm talking. No more questions. So if there's questions, type them in, please. Okay, so that addresses one of the more common questions is how do I make something cuttable? So it's a really quick, easy way. Now it's not going to do a perfect job every time. So if you have something that's just not doing a good job vectorizing, you can always upload it to a service called Aardvark Express. I think I spelled that right. Yeah, if you go to Aardvark Express, this is the service of stalls. You can actually upload a file here, and we'll, this service will vectorize it for you. So it'll take it from raster to vector for really, complicated images that CAD Works doesn't do a perfect job with. Okay. So back to the designer. So we've talked about templates. You ultimately know how to add text and kind of create from scratch with the effects stack. We've added clip art. We've vectorized images. Another key feature on here is script with tails that people want to do, especially with baseball season in the spring or softball. So let me click on script with tails. There's some tails in here pre-created for you. So if I like this style here, I can just open it. I can double click on the text. And if I don't want to say, it's not welded or anything yet because we realize you're probably going to want to edit the text to say the team. So in this case, let's just do Pirates. You can select whatever font you want, change the character spacing. If you want to add an effect, go ahead, but I'm just going to click OK. At that point, you can kind of slide things around. I'm going to have the tail overlap with the Pirates a little bit so I can weld it all together. If I wanted to change baseball over to, let's just say, Indiana, change the fonts. You can, drag and scroll and change sizing any way you want until you have it visually how you like it. At that point, I can select this piece, hold the Shift key, and select the tail, and then I'm going to go ahead and weld those together. When it welded, it brought it to the foreground, so it used to say Indiana there. That's still there. It's just behind that layer. So I just need to select that so I can see it, and I can go up to Arrange, to Align, and bring it to the front. So now you can visually see it there. If you ever think something disappeared and want to make sure it's still there, just go to the Wireframe View. And you'll be able to see that. And so when I go to the Wireframe View, you'll see it welded everything real nice for me, so it can cut. Now there's only one problem here. Let's say the Pirates, it's a split front jersey. A lot of people don't know how to decorate split front jerseys where there's overlap, or to do split front like zip up jackets or hoodies or something like that. So it's very easy with CAD Works. I can just select the item, and I'm going to double click on it and click on Add Effect. And you can see there's a whole folder here for split front effects. And there's 3 basic types of zip front. Depending on it's a men's or a women's garment, you'll pick number 1. You'll pick number 2 or 3, depending on if it's a men's or women's, since men's overlaps from left to right and women's is vice versa. If it's a zip up, then you want split front number 1, where it just splits it directly in half. But let's say I'm doing a men's shirt where it overlaps from left to right. I'll just open that style, and you can see it automatically cuts it in half and breaks up the spacing. Now remember, this is reading as an object here, and if I want to edit the split front properties, I just highlight the split front, and I can type in the overlap. So let's say this Pirates jersey has it's an 1.5 inch overlap. If I measure the distance, like where it overlaps, where the buttons are, if I can type in whatever overlap I want that's on that particular jersey that I'm decorating, and it'll automatically create it. You can also, most things are 50-50 split, but you can make it a 40-60 split or whatever, depending on the design and the layout. Once you're done, you just click OK. And you can see it automatically did the split for me. Unfortunately, the Indiana wasn't selected when I took it into there. So you want to make sure all objects are selected when you take it in to apply the split front effect, because ultimately I would need to undo and go back and do it with Indiana included. But you get the point. It automatically splits it for you. Then in the heat press process, you just need to make sure you apply it properly. which can be a challenge in itself. So make sure you take your time on split fronts. If you've ever done a split front in Corel, you know this is a lot easier. Question from Mary: if the word Indiana being cut out of the tail, so you would have the garment show through, and if not, can you show us how to do that? Yes, you would have the garment show through. So it's up to you. I mean, if you would ultimately I'm going to undo it a few steps here. So if you wanted to just do this without a split front and you wanted the Indiana cut out of the tail, when you take it to vector cut, and I'll zoom in and so you see, you would just cut it all together, and it'll cut all the cut lines present on the screen here. That way, when you press it to the garment, you know, you weed the Indiana out of the tail, the garment's going to show through. But let's just say you wanted to do, you know, Indiana out of a separate color than Pirates that's not the garment color. Then you would just cut them separately by selecting layer by layer, and then just in the heat press process, you overlap them. Okay. So that, in a nutshell, is the CAD Works Live Designer. There is some additional functionality within the designer. We don't have time to cover everything today because I want to get to the other portion that I mentioned at the front, which was the Easy Teams. So when you go to CAD Works Live, you know, you can launch any version of the designer, whether it's CAD Print or CAD Cut Designer, or you can launch the Easy Teams module. For those of you that are cutting a lot of names and numbers, the Easy Teams module is particularly beneficial because it takes a lot of time out of the production process. So I'm going to open Easy Teams here. And the screen is much the same, a lot of the same functionality with the effects stack, but it all starts at the beginning where you can create player names if you only want the names and maybe you ordered the pre-cut numbers from stalls. You can create player numbers if you just want to cut numbers for jerseys. Maybe it's for practice jerseys or reversibles. You can create player combos where it creates the name and number in alignment and everything spaced. Or you can create a sponsor list where it creates multiple copies of like a sponsor name. So if it's, you know, Home Depot, you can say you want 20 copies of Home Depot and it'll create 20 copies all at once. Something else you can do, so if we wanted to create player combos, I can create them here by, you know, typing everything in. You know, you can type everything in. It'll tell you type it with a comma separating between the name and the number. But you can also import a roster. So if let's say it's an all-star event and the tournament organizes all their teams and all their rosters and you're decorating, or the league organizes all the players on each team, you can actually have them create a Word document where there's the name, a comma, a space, and the number, and then you can transfer that over to a text file, and you can import the text file direct from your computer. So in this case, I already set up one that's the word roster. Let's see if I can pull it up here. I'm going to relaunch because I practiced this earlier. So when you click Import Roster, you select the file, and it automatically drops the roster list that's contained in that text file for you. That way it takes the burden of any typos or misspellings or anything like that off of you. You just need to make sure it has the comma after each name before the number. And when you click OK, it automatically generates them for you. Now it defaults to a pretty basic Arial font, but you can see I have all the names in the list selected here. So I can go over to Style, and I can edit the name styles of all the selected items, and this is really powerful. Let's say I want to just edit the name styles. You go into the same editor, where you can, if I wanted to do a Pro Narrow font, I can add that name style. You know, I can drop a drop shadow. If I wanted to do a drop shadow onto all the names in the whole list, I can make all of my edits here. And when I click OK, it drops them onto every name in the list. So it's pretty powerful. I mean, you do need to edit the name style and the number style independently. So if I wanted to do the same thing with the number style, I can just, do that. And let's say I just want a single color number. You can do that, and it applies to everything in the list. So at the end of the day, you set this up exactly how you want with the font and the effects you want on all the names and all the numbers, as well as the colors. If you have a certain style or layout, you can save the name style or the number style way you can recall it with a click of a button instead of creating it again. You can change the gap space. So if I need a 2-inch gap space, like for a football jersey, that's the space between the top of the number and the bottom of the name. There's rules set up by the NFHS for high school sports for that gap space, and also for the offset space for a shadow or an outline. Let's say I have a name like Ellsworth is kind of long, but let's say there's a longer name. You can have a global width constraint. So if your jerseys come in and it's a football jersey and there's literally only 13 inches of space between the shoulders before you start to go over a seam or an arm or something, you can say, let's set that global restraint to 13 inches, and then it's going to proportionally size all the names, smart size all the names within that global width constraint. Let me put something in extreme just so you can see. So you see how it sized that name and squished it down to fit within that global constraint for the whole roster. Once you have everything set up how you want, you just, it's much of the same story. You go to Output. You can save it if you want. You can download a preview to have the team sign off on it, attach it to an email, or you can send it straight to Vector Cut. If you're not going to use Vector Cut to drive your cutter, you can bring it down to your local computer as a PLT file and import it into the cut driver of your choice. So in this case, I'll send it to Vector Cut. Say I have 18-inch material in there. That's 2 yards long. Click OK, and you can see it kind of tries to smart space the names for you. And you can mirror it and then toggle things around. If I think I can fit something a little better, I can rotate, drag, and drop until I get it laid out how I want, and then cut by color. Obviously, when you select the yellow layer, you don't want to waste all this material. Although you'd be buying a lot of material from us, it's not very smart. You'd want to, bring all these down to some better spacing, possibly even rotating them to fit them across the material. So the Easy Teams is a pretty powerful tool. It's one of our most used parts of CAD Works. People really see a lot of value in the name and number generation, or even, let's just say you just want to create player numbers. You can actually say, just give me number 1 through 20, click OK, and it'll drop number 1 through 20 in here with the same effects that have already been added. So it's really easy to add one more or a list or whatever, all with the same font and effects. Yeah, so Sarah asks a good question. Is all of this available at cadworkslive.com? And yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, the cadworkslive.com has just a ton of functionality. There's different tutorials out there, webinars that we've done. Right now, the webinar tutorials are the way we help you get started. There's also live chat on the site. If you have a support question, you can send it in. It's all pretty much point and click. And you can just create all sorts of stuff, either to send to your cutter or to send to stalls. And there was a question as well, do you have to mirror to send to stalls? I think if the process dictates, we automatically mirror for you or don't mirror. So I wouldn't worry too much about mirroring to send to us. We'll know to do that for you so your stuff doesn't show up backwards. And then there was another question, how do you send with EPS? For this Easy Teams, it's a PLT file instead of the EPS, which we will accept the PLT file as well. It's just just another vector format. And then Jackie just asked a question, when you size a long name, does it affect the size of the shorter names? No, only if you set it in that global width constraint. So if I look at, the name Lewis here, you can see it looks the same. They're actually sizing down the name Ellsworth to fit within that constraint I set up and kind of shrinking that, not necessarily expanding the short name. So this is CAD Works. We encourage you to go to cadworkslive.com. I do want to launch one last poll question just to see if this was beneficial. And let's launch this for you. So do you think you will use CAD Works Live after this webinar? So 68% were not using CAD Works Live when we started. So let's see how the feedback goes now. All right, most of you have voted. I'll go ahead and share the results. So we're at 100%, so that's awesome. I mean, that's what I believe. I think there's a lot of functionality in this program. I think it could bring a lot of benefit to your business. So I appreciate the questions that came in, everybody that came out today for the Great Garment Graphics webinar on CAD Works Live. And the next webinar is November 15th, 2012, and it's called Advanced Transfer Techniques from Transfer Express. So I would encourage you guys to sign up for that when you log off today at greatgarmentgraphics.com. Thanks for attending, and have a great day.